To the state of our workforce. Where are we now? Each month, we take a deeper dive into the diverse, innovative, and effective workforce solutions the National Fund is adopting to address local challenges across the country. My name is Michelle Wilson, and I am the Director of Evaluation and Learning at the National Fund. With me today are two stars in the workforce, in the world of workforce. I hope they're doing this. Carrie Felton, Director of Worker Success, and Tom Strong, Director of Employee Activation. Hey, y'all.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Hi.
So you guys ready? Yes.
Ready.
We talk a lot about occupational segregation and workforce development, as we should. It's a big issue, and it's one of the key drivers in the challenges we face to create equitable workforce outcomes. And for us at the National Fund, we've planted our stake in the ground around this issue. And I also, in doing so, I just want to give props to the National Fund Network for being in lockstep with us on this. That's really important. You know, the beauty of our network is that while we may not have all the answers, we have data. We do have data. We have commitment. We have voice. We have leverage. We have space. We have informed theories and ideas. We have resources and partners that allow us to test, refine, and implement strategies to improve workforce outcomes. So I'm super happy that we get to chat about some of all of that today. So let's go ahead and get started. And just want to level set by sharing with you our definition of occupational segregation, which is in the chat. But the National Fund defines occupational segregation as the distribution of workers across and within occupations based on demographics such as race, ethnicity, and gender. And it's really often at the intersection of these characteristics. Our aim is to disrupt occupational segregation at the regional level by driving coordinated policy and practice changes across the workforce, and post-secondary education systems and communities to help ensure that race does not dictate employment outcomes. A mouthful, that's why it's in the chat, but really to get that. So, and before I ping to Carrie, I want to talk about some of the things that we're doing at the National Fund on a high level, or where we are moving in this space. We really are looking at the child care space, healthcare, construction, and of course, across all of those occupations, looking at the role of career navigation. So we're doing a lot in the space, and we have a few minutes to talk about it, so we're going to dig in. So Carrie, I'm ping to you. Tell me more about what's happening in the equipping workers space around occupational segregation at the National Fund.
Thanks, Michelle. So occupational segregation is a really big problem when you look at the grouping of certain races and different job categories and sectors. So for us, the way that it's showing up in the Equipping Workers for Success team is, we're advancing strategies. We're working with our network, like you said, some of our sites around equitable post-secondary education career pathways. And what's bubbling up in those sites is that when we look at, and we have a particular focus on really using strong partnerships between community college, technical colleges, and industry partners and industry partnerships to really make sure that when you finish a certificate or a credential, you can get into a good job. So what we've seen bubbling up in those communities that we're working in is a lot of the career pathways that have the strongest connections to good jobs. Oftentimes are job category sectors that are predominantly white, sometimes predominantly male. And so some of the strategies of like, how can we diversify this really are pointing at disrupting the drivers of occupational segregation, whether that is, how can we get more people of color, women and people of color interested in manufacturing or construction, some of these industries, to even enroll in these programs, or whether it's about removing barriers to enrollment or completion or retention that are disproportionately impact communities of color. All of these things that have come up as challenges. We're talking about equity. And so really, we were taking cues from the collaboratives that we're working in and saying, like, we really want to really focus in on occupational segregation, really support our collaboratives and partnerships and working together to start to peel back the onion and look at the data and say what really is driving, what are some of the drivers of sort of this grouping or this overconcentration, or in some places, or sorry, underrepresentation. And in some categories, we know there are certain jobs or industries where people of color are overrepresented, and we see the opposite, right? Those often lead to lower wage, lower quality jobs. So there's two sides of that coin that we're seeing, and in our team, we're really focusing on community colleges and kind of the sphere of helping folks move through those credential programs to really connect to good jobs.
Thanks. That makes sense. I mean, and that really what we talk about is because occupational segregation, like it's big, right? Like you really have to look at how you address it on multiple fronts. And so I'm curious, Tom, I'll ping to you and ask you. So what does it look like in addition to what Carrie's saying, but what does it actually look like to do this work? Because we've been thinking and doing these things for quite some time. These aren't really new. We've always known we've needed to address this. We need to address this, but what does it look like through the lens of occupational segregation?
So that's a really good question. And I want to build off of the experience that Carrie was sharing, which, yes, some of the factors that really keep occupational segregation in place have to do with education. They have to do with what we think of as those social determinants of work. They also have to deal with the choices that employers make are a big factor in keeping occupational segregation in place. And Carrie raised the example of like, okay, frontline, like especially service industry jobs that are disproportionately represented by people of color. So let's think about a specific industry. In healthcare, major frontline jobs such as certified nursing assistants or home health aides, those are very disproportionately women of color who are employed in those roles. They're very low wage roles. They're roles that in most settings don't have much of a career ladder or career pathway attached to them. They're what we think of as dead-end jobs. And unfortunately, through the decades, like many employers have said, okay, like we're just going to go along with this because this is the way things have always been. It's kind of the path of least resistance to keep these jobs in that format. And it leads to the kind of occupational segregation that we're talking about today. They don't challenge the system as it is. We do find, though, that there's value in some employers out there who do challenge it, who do think about how can we reconceive this role so that people work closer to the top of their scope and do have opportunities for education, do have opportunities for advancement. There are some really good programs that are being developed right now by PHI and Cooperative Home Care Associates in New York, for instance, where they're experimenting with advanced roles for home health aides and kind of building in more of a gerontology lens into them. So that work is possible. There are employers who are taking those steps and really trying to challenge the system, but it's not easy. And we see our role at the National Fund as being about both supporting and recognizing employers that do that, but also challenging those that don't, because ultimately we don't think that it's better for employers either to just go along with what everyone else is doing. In fact, we think of an entrepreneurship, as about really kind of coming up with new solutions,
Right.
new ways of doing business.
So, and speaking of CNA, so and like certain jobs, CNA jobs aren't going to go away. So in spaces, so it's a both and, right? So for people who want to advance, they can, but in spaces where people choose to do it CNAs, which is perfectly reasonable and acceptable, that's where job quality comes into play, our job quality work, right? Like it's a both and I know you do a lot in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're ultimately like restaurant jobs too, like is another great example. We're always going to have a lot of people working in those roles. It's not sufficient to just create a pathway out because there's going to be more people working on them. Like we have to think about how to make those jobs better at the same time.
Which goes to one of our goals at the National Fund. All jobs are good jobs. Just wanted to get that in there. So one of the things I really appreciate about having both of you on the call is that you work on opposite ends of the spectrum, but it requires that we work together, right? Obviously, equal access, activate employers for improved outcomes. We are also, and so I wanted to say that, but in addition to that, we also are working in the construction space and the care space in child care. So is there anything that you want to offer, say about that work, or tee the up that work that we are plotting and planning around that space, Tom?
Yeah, I'll just add that we are planning some big moves in the construction industry right now. It is obviously a space where there's a lot of federal investment, there's a lot of philanthropic investment, there's a lot of real career pathways in that industry, and the problem of occupational segregation and really outright discrimination is very, very difficult in that industry. I would say even more so than in healthcare. And how to both change organizational cultures in that industry while also really kind of helping people sustain through the educational programs, and that is a big question we're gonna try to address.
Right. So we're on the countdown, but I want to create space for you all to talk about what you're most excited about. Obviously, we have 15 minutes to dig into this. You'll hear more about this work as we continue to move and engage along work in this space. But Carrie, tell me, what are you most excited? Well, first, what do you see? I think you put it, if you can do both, and I think you can. Like, what do you see as a challenge in doing that? Like really disrupting and what we're doing around disrupting occupational segregation, and what are you most, and why does it matter? So 3 questions.
So you're putting me on the spot, Wilson. I'm going to answer 3 questions in 1 answer. So what I am excited about is actually related to the challenge, which is that occupational segregation has so many drivers. There's so many things that are driving and keeping this phenomenon in place, including sort of attitudes and stereotypes and beliefs about people of color and gender and all of those things that are really ingrained, and they're hard to disrupt. And what I'm excited about is at the National Fund, just leveraging the support we can provide to our collaboratives that are all about working together across institutions, across sectors to really address the problem. So we really want to create space, time, support for them to come together and think about what is this slice of this really big problem that we actually feel like we can influence. And I'll just give a quick shout out to our collaborative in Springfield, Massachusetts, Springfield Works, that has been focusing on this question that we've been talking about around CNAs and LPNs. And they have come together with their hospital system and their community colleges, and they spent a ton of time, a ton of resources. I mean, it hasn't been easy, but they've gotten to a place where they've been able to start to like point to some things they want to try and have resources to test it out. So that's just like what I'm excited about, is trying to move the needle.
Nice. Tom, what are you excited about over in your space, and why does it matter?
One thing that I'm really excited about right now is our CareerStat Frontline Worker Champion Award Program, which was just launched for the first time in 4 years last week and is continuing to accept applications through September 22nd. My teammates, Melissa Cleater and Claudio Mano, put a ton of work into reconceiving and revitalizing this award program, and got a lot of help as well from our executive committee that helps guide CareerStat overall. But in particular, like, we've really rethought the application process itself. There is still a lot of emphasis on career pathways and what we think of as traditional workforce development, but also the social determinants of work, a racial equity and inclusion lens, which is threaded throughout everything, and really trying to disrupt those factors behind occupational segregation. So we're really excited about the new program, and we are looking for applicants right now.
And we will put the link to that application in the chat. So we are at time. Obviously, I want to thank you both. I appreciate you deep for joining us here today on State of Our Workforce. I appreciate and understand that you could have been anywhere else in the world. That's my Jay-Z quote, but you decided to be here with me, and I appreciate that. Amanda Cage joins us next month for Workforce Development Month, and we have a special announcement about what's happening at the National Fund. So join us next month on State of Our Workforce. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.